Hello, welcome back to the Black Speculative Arts Movement Conference, Future Waves, Afrofuturism 2.0, and the World. We're so lucky to be able to talk to just thousands of people from every corner of the globe as we consider what futures make the most sense going forward. And a particular theme in here is about historic preservation. And I'm very fortunate to sit with Jolie Davis, Macalester College, who has designed one of the most groundbreaking and insightful historic preservation projects of the last decade. So again, my name is Walter Grayson, also known as Sage Gray, and this is for the Future Waves event in Dakar, Senegal. So, Jolie, thank you so much for being here with us. Could
Oh,
you tell us a little bit about your work and how you came to be involved at this project at Macalester?
yeah. So, kind of dating it back around spring semester, I was contacted by the CEC at Macalester, which is the Civic Engagement Center. And one of the members that works there is Cedric McClure. And he had emailed me and he had told me he had a internship in mind for me and that he wanted to meet with me. So we set up a meeting time and we met a couple times before, but this one was more about the internship. So when we had met, he kind of told me how it was laid out. Now, what's interesting about it is that it's not like your traditional internship where they kind of have what you're gonna do, like your positioning, and this is what's expected of you during the 10 weeks you are there during the summer. But instead, it was kind of like, how would I say this? It was kind of a trial run for this internship, and that they want to test the waters and see where the direction of this internship could go. So I was kind of like, in a sense, I like to say a guinea pig for this internship, but it wasn't that like I was testing anything out to see what can I do with this, and if they like what I did with this, could this be a possibility for the future? And so the premise of this internship was with the Elder Mahmoud El Qadi's funds that they had got in recently. And with that, they were thinking of working with Hallie Q. Brown, the community center that is in the historic Rondo neighborhood in St. Paul. And in collaboration with them, they were thinking of doing historic preservation through like the archives that they have there and how could they essentially put at the forefront what Hallie and what Rondo is about and their history throughout the years before the implementation of I-94 and afterwards, and how that could be pushed out more into the community and more. And so with this project, I had touched base with the executive director, Benny Roberts, and we kind of brainstormed ideas on how we would want to envision this project and how we can go about historic preservation. And in the class that I took with Professor Walter Grayson, and it was about emotions, African Americans in the United States. I made a prototype of a board game, which is a spinoff of the Game of Life. And it was about the Harlem Renaissance, the African American arts and culture um, movement that they had in the 1920s, 1930s. And with that, I had presented it to Benny Roberts and he loved the idea. He was really ecstatic about it. He was like, I really love this. But we ran into kind of a wall where they already had a board game about Rondo called Rondopoly. And I just didn't want to kind of impede on that if they already had a board game. I wanted to do something original and something that could provide more benefit than a board game. And so I had to do a lot of out of the box thinking with this. And for, like somewhere in my mind, something just like sparked. And I was like, what is something that could really touch base with the youth and something that can be preserved for a very long time. And I thought about how like everything is becoming more digitalized and how we are slowly but surely incorporating technology into everything. And so I was thinking, okay, what if I make a virtual game of Rondo? And I was like, okay, if I make a virtual game of Rondo, what platform will I use of this? Because I am a biology with biochem emphasis major, so I don't have much to do with the computer science world. but I wanted to do it because I've had past experience with computer science stuff, like using Scratch and like really low stakes coding platforms. And so I thought back to like my childhood and games I used to play, and I was like, Roblox. Like it came to me. I was like, Roblox. Like this is still a thing. Like you still play Roblox to this day. And I'm like, you know what? I could do Roblox because I've heard that like Roblox Studio is free to use and anybody with any skill of computer science can use it. Like you do not need to be well versed into coding to use Roblox Studio. So I was like, you know what? And I also have YouTube at my disposal. So I brought this idea to Benny, and he had asked me, have you used Roblox Studio before? And I told him, no, I did not have any experience using Roblox Studio before, but I have experience playing Roblox. And so he just gave me the leap of faith and he was like, I trust you, I trust your vision. And if you say you can do it, go for it. And with that, I started my 10-week endeavor of building kind of the Rondo in a kind of Rondo-Verse kind of thing. So we got the inspiration from the Spider-Verse
Yep.
and kind of how there's multi dimensions. And with this Rondo-Verse on Roblox thing, it is multi-dimensional as we are looking at Rondo before I-94, and then when I-94 was constructed, and then after I-94, so Rondo today. And so with that, the premise of my Rondo-Verse game was that I highlight 5 centers within old Rondo and present Rondo, and then kind of have a historical walkthrough of your player. So a little insight into Roblox. It's a online game platform where like anyone above the age of like 13 can like log on and play, and essentially there are many different experiences. So there's like many different creators on the platform that create many different games. There are horror games, there are action games, there are educational games, like kind of anything at your disposal you can create on Roblox as long as it follows the Roblox guidelines. And with that, your player that you create can go into these different experiences and interact with the games. So with Rondo-Verse, your character goes into it. You start at old Rondo, and then there's the 5 centers that are there. So there is old Q Brown and what it looks like when that before the highway was implemented. Then next to it, there is a religious center where it hosts the many different prominent churches in Rondo neighborhood. And then right in the middle is like a social meeting house where it hosts the various social clubs that were there. And then right next to it is a convenience store, which represents the many different businesses that were in Old Rondo before the highway. And then lastly, there is a schoolhouse, which represents the educational buildings that were within. And then after you explore those 5 centers, then your character gets to enter on the highway. And this highway is a segment of the highway which highlights the 240 exit onto Dale to Rondo. And you kind of go on that highway and it will take you to present day Rondo. And kind of the purpose that the highway serves is it's not supposed to like invoke negative feeling of a lot was lost when the highway was built, which there was a lot was lost when the highway was built. But I didn't want to put the sole focus on the negativity, but instead kind of take back that negativity and turn into positivity and use the highway as a connector between Orondo and present day Rondo. So this way you don't see it as a the highway destroyed our community, but it's kind of like a bridge between, and that we can get some positivity even though the history is negative. And so after you go onto the highway, then you're led to present day Rondo. And then again, kind of the same scenario as we have 5 centers. And in present day Rondo, we have the businesses, we have education, and then kind of an addition to, instead of having the religious and social clubs sectors, because there was a change over time due to like different reasonings, the highway and all that, we added it was like social service, yes, social service, and then community offering. So we added those 2 sectors, and then we have Hallie Q Brown present day. So a lot of planning, a lot of like tweaks were put into this in order to make it work, because I had started off making kind of the buildings blocksy a little bit, like they weren't really kind of I don't know, as detailed. And I was thinking like, okay, well, I have enough time to make them as detailed as possible. But I had the determination. I was like, no, I want to actually make these buildings look like something like you can tell that this is a schoolhouse. You can tell that that is New Halley versus Old Halley. Like, so there's not like, it's not the same throughout. Like the buildings are just not the same buildings. And so again, with those tweaks of how it looked like before and how it looks like now, there's much improvement that you can look at Old Halley and be like, that looks exactly like Old Halley. Or you can look at New Halley and be like, that looks like what it looks like today. Like kind
Mhm.
of those conversation starters is what I wanted to, because like the first thing you see when you enter into the game is those buildings. And I want those buildings to invoke positive feelings of, if like let's say a person who has gone to Old Halley, who grew up going to the child care center, can be like, yes, I remember that building. Like that's the building where I was a part of like the first class ever that was there. Or, oh, I remember the Turtle Club when you go into like the social clubs, like having these different things. And within those centers, there are images that show the various different things that were held and were happening within those centers. So it was a process within the 10 weeks. And I know that in hindsight, 10 weeks doesn't seem like a lot for a game, especially. So it's like mind blowing how it was all put together in 10 weeks. But definitely, like, kind of the outcome of this project was that I was able to give something back to the community in a form that it can be preserved for a very long time, because I'm pretty sure we all know that technology is not going anywhere. It is currently and constantly evolving. And so, with that, I wanted it to be preserved in a well mannered way where if someone of the next generation, the next youth, it could get passed down through these generations and it'll keep the history of Rondo alive, because we
Mhm.
know there is still a constant fight of trying to have Rondo as an integral part of St. Paul and not get rewritten or like kind of crossed out because of time. And that we see that in these various places of like how the highway did. Like the highway really did try to push the Rondo community out. Like the many African American families that were displaced because of the highway. Like that was a part of that. And even constantly today, like when we see the cars that drive onto the highway, like the emissions of gas that affects the asthma of the youth that grow up with these things, and that like they have to move because of the noise and the air pollution, all these different things. Like we see that it may not be directly like we want you out, but there's also these indirect things, pushers that want people out of the community out. And when we see with gentrification, all these different things, like there's a lot of, it's not forward like we want you out, like we will like build new buildings, do this and that kind of behind the backs, so this way they can just push the history out. But we want the history to stay within, and if we can do things like preserve it through games or oral history or all these different things, that's how you keep it alive even if we can't physically be there. And so with that project, I really wanted to put emphasis on that, that the history is still alive and we're going to make sure we keep it alive no matter what. And one way to do is virtually, because again, we know that the evolution of technology, but that is powerful and we know it won't be going anywhere. So I'm very proud of my work and I'm very glad that the outcome has been very positive and impactful.
And I have so many questions. I'm sure everybody else, after they see this, will be flipping out and trying to get a hold of you to figure out how do they follow your lead. But I know that you mentioned, we started out in the spring with this in
Hmm.
motion class, and you
Yeah.
did this. It was unusual because we were in an art classroom, and a lot of it was
Hmm.
about working on art computers and how do you create a game.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you approached the Renaissance project, and then what that did to shape kind of your ideas about how to do the Roblox piece, because it's two entirely different kinds of
Yeah.
constructs. And that's also a huge achievement that you
Hmm.
totally adapted the medium of how to do the design. It's not like you took your blueprint from Harlem Renaissance and turned that into what you did with
Yeah.
Mondo. So I
Hmm.
wanted you to compare these very different constructs because, again, it showcases how brilliant your work is. And that's not even your main field. Like you're actually
Hmm.
working in biology. And so
Yeah.
that just is an extraordinary thing to share with everyone.
Hmm. Yeah. So the concept of the Harlem Renaissance board game, pretty much it stemmed from a unit that we were working on where we were kind of playing around on Adobe Illustrator and seeing if we can make a Monopoly board on there where we had like different pieces that represent different aspects in African American history. And so it was kind of up to our liberation of which aspects of African American history we wanted to put on that Monopoly board. And for me, because I really love the arts, and this is where my minor ties in because I want to get a studio art minor. And so I was thinking, I was like, okay, African American culture and history, and then the arts. And then it hit me the Harlem Renaissance. And I was like, okay, I want to do something with the Harlem Renaissance. And originally I wanted to go with the Monopoly board theme, but I tweaked it, I tried it out. It just wasn't like something was off about it. And I was just like, I don't want to confine it to Monopoly. Like, I don't know, like the monetary value of like the Harlem Renaissance, that it just wasn't clicking for me. So it's like, okay, let me change gears here. Like, let me not focus on Monopoly. Let me focus at a different game aspect. And when I was thinking, I did a lot of research on different games to see what would click. And I landed on the game of life. As we know, the game of life is you're playing with multiple people to see your different paths that you can go on in life. And so you have these cards, these little characters where you end up, it's just a game of probability, like the chances of you becoming a doctor, or chances of family, and all these different things. And so I was like, okay, I can get somewhere with this. And so I was doing background research on the Harlem Renaissance and then tying that to the game of life. And how I came about it was like with the Harlem Renaissance, instead of like it being like, okay, this is you as a person who's starting off and then you're kind of climbing the ranks within, I was like, okay, how about it's you're playing against different characters and you are kind of like an entity that are like scouting talent. And because the Harlem Renaissance was a lot like there was a lot of talent. There was painters, musicians, singers, actors. And so I was like, okay, how can I go about that? So it was like I believe it was 2 to 6, not 2 to 6, 4 to 6 players about that you can have in this game. And you're kind of competing to see how many different notable characters and figures within the Harlem Renaissance you can discover. And so, kind of the background of it is that you have these little boxes, and these boxes you can collect tokens, and these tokens represented different figures within the Harlem Renaissance. So, like, for example, if you were to discover Ella Fitzgerald, you can claim a microphone token. And I printed that in our DRC, which is our Digital Resource Center here on campus. And I spent like 5 hours in the DRC 3D printing, getting the cards right, all that to put in work in order to make this a tangible thing that people can actually play and interact. Because I didn't want it to just be a thing that I invented in my mind and put on pen and paper. I want it to be an actual thing that this is possible and you can do that. And so I really put a lot of hard work and dedication into this. And I was like, yeah, I really like this idea. And then with the cards I made from scratch. So like I know, for example, with one of my cards, it's called like, oh no, here comes trouble. And with that card, it incorporates history. So it's like you have the aspect of your playing, and this is like a game, but also incorporates factual things. So, like, I know, for example, if we think of a club, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think, I believe the Cotton Club, one of them, and that in those clubs that there weren't it wasn't allowed to have African American patrons in the things themselves. So like you couldn't go in to like see a show or something as a patron. You had to be an entertainer in order to be a part of it. So with that on the card, it was like, oh, if you draw this card, unfortunately you can't go in as a patron. You have to be an entertainer, and if you're not an entertainer you have to go back a couple spaces because you are not the entertainer yourself. You're a patron because you're scouting for talent, but you can't be in there because
Mhm.
you are embodying an African American, so you couldn't. So like having those factual pieces in it gives a sense of reality, and it hits you when you play those games like, man, I really couldn't do that, or a person really couldn't do that if they were African American during this time period. And so I wanted to add factual tidbits in there. So then there's realism to this game that you're not playing something completely fictional in a sense because it's in game form, but this is like reality, and that these figures that you're collecting are real people, like Duke Ellington and Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong. Like these are people that were alive during this time that were making a living during the arts, culture, and movement, and that I wanted to incorporate that. And with that, I was very like proud, very satisfied with my work because again, I put in a lot of time to this and I had to do revisions, but I'm glad I followed my heart and was like, no, this wasn't right the first time when I tried it with Monopoly and turned it into something that I'm really proud of that I have. And that this board game is a physical thing and I have it at the Hallie Key Brown Community Center. That's where it is right now. And
Oh.
so with that, it's just they were astounded. Like when I showed Executive Director Benny Roberts, he was just like, wow, this is amazing. Like we have to get people to play it. And so I
Mhm.
am looking for people to play it. I haven't got anyone to play it yet, but that is definitely a possibility. And I'm looking forward for people to play this game because I actually want to see it work and actually get those emotions of wow, like really, like they take
Mhm.
away things from this and they're learning as they're playing. And with that, when I was given the opportunity to do this internship at the Hallie Q Brown Community Center, when I had mentioned that they already had a board game, Rondo-Opoly, I was like, okay, how can I kind of take the things that I did within this class with this board game that I created, and how can I adapt that in a way that I can change it up and make it something different, but not essentially like kind of steer away from that. And so the concept of a game is what stuck with me because I made a board game, but I also wanted to continue with that game theme of how can we gamify history? Because we have a lot of oral history, but I feel like, a game is like that's really like something different that a lot of people haven't done. Like in my times and reading about history, I haven't really played much history games. Like in history classes, there are not much games that are available for history. And so I was like, okay, how can I change that in a way?
Mhm.
And I did a lot of thinking, and again, that ties back to the idea of Roblox and how like there are still kids playing it to this day. Like it's one of those games where like it's being passed down to the next generation. Like there are 5-year-olds playing Roblox, and there's people who are like in their teens still playing Roblox. Like this is things that are being passed down because how versatile the platform is. Like it's not confined to one thing. Like if we think of a game off the top of my head, like Fortnite, for example, like it's an action game, but it's
Yeah.
just like that's all you do is it's just action. Like it gets tiring quick, it gets very repetitive. But with
Mhm.
Roblox, because there's so many different genre on the platform, you really can't get tired in a sense because you can always find something new, right?
Yeah.
And it's a thing with Roblox too, it's international. So you're connecting with people on different bases. Like there could be somebody you meet in Malaysia or somebody in Brazil. Like this is an international platform. So it's not confined only to the United States. And so with that huge outreach, like many games can go international quickly if it's popular. So it's not only confined here. And with that, I was like, this is a really good platform to do something like this, especially if we plan to get it out there and to show the community other people. It's not a thing that will be constricted and confined to one thing, that it can reach many people, like millions of people if it could. So with that, I was like, okay, how can I put the history of Rondo into this game? And kind of with the background knowledge of the board game and all those things, I was like, okay, let me map it out first. Let's see my options. Like, let me plan it out. So I got my iPad out and I was like, okay, let's list some things that were there during old Rondo, like during the old Rondo times. Let's list some things that were here present Rondo, and kind of taking those ideas, picking them apart. I'm like, okay, I can work with this. We had a lot of ideas and we had to do a focus group. So we did 2 focus groups because we wanted to get feedback from the community, especially from our elders. And at first, with the first focus group, I had thought that in my mind, I don't know if they're gonna like it because it's with technology. And so I was just like, okay, well, how can I sell this in a way that, they would like it and that it would sound good? So I was kind of like nervous a little bit because I was like, okay, this is with technology. It can get a little dicey because I know that some people have like feelings of technology, like technology is rotting the youth brains and those kind of like
Mhm.
conceptions of that. And so I was like, okay, how can I put this in a way? And so I just went with my gut. I was like, you know what? It's going to be fine. I just tell them how it is. And whatever response I get is whatever response I get, right? Whatever feedback I get, I can implement that into my game and it'll be good. It would be great. And so I went into the first focus group and it was a complete different thing than I expected. They loved it. And so with that, I was like, huge relief. Like that was great. I love that they loved it because that told me that I was heading in the right direction. Because if they loved it, that means, okay, we're going somewhere with this, especially because it's something we're giving to them, but we're also leaving their generations as well because these elders grew up in the Rondo neighborhood and community. So they have grandsons, granddaughters, all these different things, like many different generations. Like these families are multi-generational. So they have generations that are going to be most impacted by this because it's going to be a thing that we want to keep forever. And so with that, when they had gave me the green light and they're like, yeah, it was, I would say a lot because they loved it so much. They had so many ideas and they really wanted this thing to be full fledged. And mind you, it's only 10 weeks that I am at this place.
Hmm.
And so to do a full fledged Roblox game was kind of like, we had to like dwindle it down. That's how we came up with 5 centers because it was going to be too much to do
So
a
much.
whole thing. Yeah, a whole full scale was too much, especially because it was like, you know, only me working on this game. So I was just like, it would be too much for me. And I knew my limits. So I was like, let's confine this into 5 centers. Let's put as much as we can into these centers. And let's not forget the most integral part. So we're like, which ones do you want to see? Like, which one most holds in your heart? Like, which one
Memories.
can you remember off the top of your head and be like, yes, this invokes memory. This invokes good feeling. So we took back that feedback and then we applied it into the game. So within those centers, adding images and adding text in there so that when you walk up to these different places, you get a little text box that tells you about these things. And so with that, okay, I was heading in the right direction. And then I started with that. So it really started with building the centers first. And then after getting the centers laid out and how I wanted it to look, then I went in and added the photos within each center. And then after that, it was a mirror of decoration, adding like different things for the aesthetic. And then looking at the highway of okay, how am I going to bridge these two things together? Because again, it takes a lot of coding in Roblox if you want to do certain things, like you want your character to teleport after a certain thing. So like again, I was thinking of the time frame, like this will be too much to do. Again,
Yeah.
it's part of the full-fledged thing. So I was like, okay, the highway history is very important to the Rondo history. And I'm like, I can't not forget to put this in there, even though it's not a positive thing. We still have to talk about it because it negatively impacted the Rondo community. So I was like, okay, how can I talk about it in a way that it's not making it very grave, that when the player is in there, they're not kind of feeling negative about it? Like, I'm going to tell the story how it is, but like, I don't want it to be kind of
To
like this
push
deep
people
feeling.
away. Yeah.
Exactly. So it took a lot of thought. But as I was drawing it out on my iPad, I was like, what if I use the highway as a bridge of some sort to bridge Rondo in the olden days and bridge Rondo in the present days together? So this way it wasn't a thing that was detracting and just saddening. So when I was laying it out in the Roblox studio, it just was clicking for me. It was like, okay, no, this is good. Like I like where this is going. Like using this as a bridge is perfect because then your character can go back and forth between old and new Rondo. And so using that, adding little conveyor belts in there because those conveyor belts can take your virtual player to and from Rondo, and I was just like, this works perfectly. Like, this is a
Mhm.
seamless, smooth transition between the two. And I was like, okay, this is all falling in place. And once I kind of kept adding for aesthetics and all these little things, like the final result, it was just amazing on how things just worked. And people really loved the highway. When I had showcased this during my second focus greeting and then the final, like when I showed everybody my work, it was just the highway was the one that stuck out. And it wasn't for bad reason. It wasn't because the highway destroyed our neighborhood. It's because you found a way to make the highway positive rather than negative. And that was just amazing that I was able to do that. Because again, like that is kind of a mountain to climb because it is a very negative thing. Anybody like anytime I tell people about the Rondo, like I worked at Hallie Q Brown, they talk about the highway because that's kind of how people learn about Rondo is through the highway. And so to be able to take that negative narrative and spin it into a way of positive of, okay, look at the highway connecting these two places together. It was just like everybody was just like, wow.
No,
Like,
I'll say, just as someone who does a ton of game design and puts things together, the balance that you give the construction in Rondo-Verse, where it's past and present, and you have this
mm-hmm,
really jarring moment with the highway construction.
Mhm.
but all of it, seamless is a great word. The way that the feeling of the gameplay works is just it's spectacular. And again, to do it in such a
Mhm.
small bit of time. We're running up against the end of this. There was one last thing I wanted to kind of open up to get your comments on. And
Mhm.
so most of these folks who are attending the conference are from all over the world, and they're all
Mhm.
dealing with their own rondo back home. You
Mhm.
know, some of them in Central Africa have really dramatic circumstances, civil war and strife, and yet they
Mhm.
still want to preserve history. They still want to make sure the stories are told and that their culture moves forward. And
Yeah.
so this is a really powerful way that they can look at what you've done, but then apply it to their circumstances. For me, the particular thing I'm doing is actually about the history of Black medicine. And so the
Mhm.
way that doctors and surgeons and nurses, how their careers all unfolded and their communities. Essentially, where did
Mhm.
these Black medical professionals live as their careers grew, especially in the late 19th and early 20th century? And
Mhm.
so it's kind of like the history of what you're moving into for your field.
Mhm.
I'm very interested in creating things like the Rondo-Verse that connect the past and present of very prosperous Black communities. For folks in
Mhm.
Africa or in other parts of the African diaspora, do you have thoughts or ideas about how they would take what you did for Rondo here in Minnesota and then build out their vision of what they want to create as communities and their histories online?
Yeah. So kind of how I said of like the come up of this is that really I emphasize doing research, but also like thinking back to your childhood, like starting there, like these things of like, how did you learn about different things? Like, where did it start for you for the learning? Was it within the books? Was it on like online platforms and all these different things? Like, really starting there and tapping into that because you can get inspiration from that. Because I think that when we think about the past, we kind of leave it in the past, especially in education, where it's like we learned this, but it's time to move on to better things. And so we kind of just move in this linear direction where we kind of don't go back to the things that we learned because those things can be very valuable. And so me thinking back to me playing Roblox, you can think like, oh, you were just playing a children's game. But with that children's game, I realized and did research and was like, oh, I can actually make a game of my own for free on this platform. And that in turn inspired me to make a game about the Rondo history. And I just really want to emphasize that there is power within the things that you have learned and that you're learning things for a reason. You're never learning something for no reason. When you obtain this knowledge and retain it, it's something that's going to be carried on with you. Because I feel like there's a lot of things where we kind of neglect or push back in the back of our mind because we're like, we're not going to need this in life. Like we walk through life now, we're like, yeah, I don't really need that. Like I'm not, no. Like for me, again, I'm going back to my major. I am biology. I have nothing to do with history or with the arts per se, even though I'm getting an art minor. Like biology in itself is natural science. It doesn't really cross paths with history unless they create like a class for it. But like in it's general, like in general, it's just biology, natural science. And so with that, I feel like the different things we learn, especially in like prereq classes that you take as a freshman, but those classes we kind of throw those away as like, oh, those are just classes we need as prereqs, right? They have nothing to do with our major. But the power of going to a liberal arts college, if you have the opportunity to do so, is that you get to learn many different things in the span of time that you're there. And with that, that is essentially a privilege because then you're not confined to only what you want to do, but your mind is open to many different perspectives and possibilities in the world. Because that's what's very important. Sure, we need to be knowledgeable in the things that we want to be knowledgeable, but we also need to be knowledgeable about the outside things too, because we have to be able to interact with each other, interact with different perspectives and concepts outside of our own. Because we can be very comfortable with the things that we want to learn with. We also have to be comfortable with the other things because you never know when there's going to be an overlap. Like with
Mhm.
this project, is that there was indeed an overlap, even though I am in the natural science realm. I'm branching out to the humanities and the history and working in community engagement. With those things, I say take everything that you learn with you because you never know when you're going to need those things and when they'll spark inspiration. Because with those things, you can tap back in and be like, I remember learning this. I remember taking this class. or I was reading about this, or I found about this, and taking that in, you can apply it to different things, even if it doesn't necessarily pertain to what you want to do. It's always good because we need knowledge, we need people in these different things. And again, it's not a thing that, oh, I need to be very well versed in this thing or very educated, even if you're not particularly in that sphere in a sense. It's always good because we need more people, we need more ideas, we need this uniqueness that comes from us as humans, because then we're able to do greater things like do this project. Because you would think that they would pass it to somebody who is a major in history or who's getting, something in humanities. And it's not even that. Like, if you have the passion, you have the drive, and it's within you, people will see that. And when they see that, they'll be like, yes, even if you're not like, you know, marking off the qualifications for it, they want to see that you have the passion and drive, most importantly, because that would mean more, and it would be more fulfilling for that project if you have the passion and drive rather than, oh, I am a history major, but like, I'm just doing it just to do it rather than I have a passion, I have a drive, and I really want to do this because I want to make an impact in the world. So I definitely say to listen to that drive, listen to what is within you that is telling you to do these things, even if it's something that you may not see that you might do in the future as like a career. Like, things can be passions too. Things can be hobbies. Like, those are very important as well. And that don't limit yourself to those things that you think that you should just be doing. Like, branch out, allow yourself to be multifaceted, allow yourself to be well-rounded. I really think that well-roundedness is kind of a self mantra for myself, because like I believe that I want to be well versed and well knowledgeable in many different things. I just don't want to be only well knowledgeable in biology. I want to be able to give back to the community, be a member of the community, be able to do different projects that work with other people, not only in the science world or in the medical sense, but also in a sense where it's like, okay, socially, like, how can I give back to the community? How can I preserve history? And so, with doing so, I definitely think that it will inspire people, especially with this game, to do things of this own. And I say, go for it. I mean, if you have access, and again, like, well, I know that in many different places, that I am fortunate to be living in a country where I have many resources and I have access to many different things. But I don't want that to necessarily be a barrier for anyone to think that they can't achieve things. Like, you can start off small. Like, you don't have to start off on a big grand scale. Like, things will work itself out over time. You just have to have that drive. If you have that drive and push forward with it, then I feel like opportunities will start coming. And then that's when those resources can start pooling in. And always, like, can like be pushing it, like keep pushing it, don't give up on that, like keep pushing it, and it will be received, and somebody will pick that up and help support you along the way. So I definitely say, please, if you have that drive and passion, start there. And if you want to do something like this, go for it. Like, there are many ways of going at this. And again, it doesn't necessarily to be on Roblox. If there's a better, bigger plan that works out for people, I say start there as well. But definitely, like, having that burning passion and drive is very integral to do things like this.
Awesome. Got to close on that note. Thank you so much. And I hope
Yeah.
you'll jump in, check out some of the other presenters, but we really appreciate you giving this talk for all of the folks that
Thank
are
you.
involved. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Thank you. You too.